Could you imagine starting out a lesson for students with, I was working with Spielberg one time and he told me, that would be the coolest way to start a class ever.
Yeah, and then be like, so listen, because I know. Shut up.
Where we're going, we don't need roads.
Riz, your performance in this is unbelievable, dude. Congratulations. I've always wanted to chat with you. So seriously, thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you so much, Jake.
About halfway through the movie, I found myself, I had such an interesting experience as an audience member. I found myself frustrated that the characters who were using sign language with each other, it wasn't subtitled. Everything else in the film is subtitled except that. And then it kind of hit me and I thought, okay, for the first time in my life, I'm at a disadvantage while watching a film for being able to hear, which I thought was just really kind of a remarkable realization as an audience member. I'm just sort of curious what it means to kind of be part of a movie that I guess sort of adjust what it means to have a normal cinematic experience.
Yeah, it's a privilege. It's a privilege to be part of this project for many reasons. Just on a kind of pure acting level, it's a gorgeous script, and Darius Marder kind of entrusted me with this. And he also kind of, forced me to take this leap of faith of learning sign language and learning the drums. And this, the whole thing was challenging, but is a privilege. With regards to, how I feel about the way the film is, presented to audiences, I think we're all really proud. And the response we've had from the deaf community and the hard of hearing community has been really, really emboldening. Insofar as, look, when we go to the theater, we just assume that people can hear the dialogue. It's very rare that you go to a theater and the movie is closed captioned, but this movie is closed captioned. Every print of the movie is captioned so that everyone's enjoying the same movie. Now, having said that, often throughout the movie, members of the deaf community outnumber hearing people, on screen very frequently. And so because we're stepping into that world of the deaf community, or a section of the deaf community, we thought it would be appropriate that things aren't spelled out and explained for a hearing audience. And you actually put in the position of Ruben, my character, who, when he can't understand what people are signing, you don't understand what people are signing. The whole film has this very subjective feel with regards to its sound design, and what you're experiencing is what Ruben's experiencing.
The sound design, I would watch an entire documentary just on the sound design of this movie. There's a really quick moment in the movie that I loved, which is when Ruben is given a task of what to do. And that task is learn to be deaf. And I'm just sort of curious, what is the most important thing that you as an actor learned that sort of gave you an understanding of what it meant to be deaf?
Well, I could never fully understand what it means to be deaf, but I was very grateful to be guided and accepted by members of the deaf community, in particular my sign instructor, Jeremy Stone, who's also in the movie playing a sign instructor, who just kind of gave me an insight into many aspects, of course, of the challenges and the discrimination that community faces. But I have to say also the richness of that culture, the expansiveness of that community. And, there's this trope that he made me aware of, that often deaf people say, hearing people are emotionally repressed because they hide behind words. And when you sign, you communicate with your whole body, you embody what you're saying. When you're often a member of the deaf community, there's such a premium on communication. People share information more, people talk and communicate more. So actually, my understanding of the deaf experience was marked out by what a rich experience it is, what a rich culture it is, and how much we can learn from that community if we were able to live in a less segregated society.
You're absolutely right. They're giving me the wrap. I just want to ask really quickly about the final shot of the film. Well, not to get into spoilers, but it's one of the most powerful final shots I've seen in a movie in a long time. I'm just sort of curious how much you have thought beyond that moment in terms of where Ruben goes from there, or for you, does the story stop when it cuts to black?
I would love people to go home with that question in their minds. And it seems that if there's one thing that's clear, is that this film seems to leave people with a very visceral, emotional reaction. And honestly, I would just love to hear from people, to hear what they think and what their take is on kind of what happens next.
Well, I have a lot of thoughts, but I don't want to ruin it for people because I want them to be able to experience it for themselves. But if you can't tell, man, I'm such a massive fan of yours and a massive fan of this film's. Always wanted to chat, and hopefully next time we get to chat, we can shake hands in person, man, because it's a pleasure.
Thanks so much, Jake.
All right, take care. Olivia, you are amazing in this. I love this movie so much, and I always tell people I don't say anything if I don't like the movie. I just kind of just sit here awkwardly, but seriously, it's so good. So congratulations. Obviously, something you and Riz have in common, you've both had the chance to explore characters, both in films over the course of 2 hours, and then obviously over the course of multiple episodes in the world of television, him with The Night Of and you with Vanity Fair. I think Lou is fascinating. When the movie was over, I could have just kept following her or loved to know who she was before all of this. If you could have explored someone like her over the course of multiple episodes, 5, 6, 7 hours, what are some aspects of who she is that you'd like to dive more so a little deeper into?
Well, luckily for me, Darius gave me a very extensive backstory for her that was written up. It's somewhere in the depths of my emails. And it followed her upbringing with her mother, like her relationship with the mother, why she's got this very estranged relationship with her father, who's French, who lives in Paris, and why she hasn't seen him for so long. I'd like to explore that. Her mental health issues, the reason why her and Ruben became so codependent, and I think what got her into music and what she's trying to rebel from ultimately.
Well, the movie does a really good job of kind of giving us morsels. There are a lot of little pieces, the scars on your wrist, like a lot of little things that sort of hint as to who she is, which kind of fleshes her out more so, I think, than, obviously if you were to take those away. You mentioned music. Obviously, you get to sing in the film, which the second performance at the end of the film was unbelievable. But what stood out to me about those moments is that it didn't feel like you were stopping your performance in order to sing. It felt like you were continuing on and acting simultaneously while singing, because there's a lot that you have to get out in that performance in that moment. What is the balance whenever you're performing in front of a camera for a film? What's the balance of worrying about singing and sounding good, but then also making sure that you're not breaking character and that you're sort of singing as your character would?
Oh God, yeah. I think because the performances were live and Darius tried to create an atmosphere that was as authentic as possible. So the second performance with Mathieu, we met the night before and then we ran through the song that morning maybe 3 times, and then all of a sudden we're he's like, Lou, like come and sing with me. And I think my reaction is quite genuine. I think there's little Lou in there, or Lou and Olivia are very, very close together in that moment. I think I was dying and very mortified anyway.
Well, you hit it very well. So congratulations on that. Well done. Obviously, as we wrap up, a huge theme of this movie, it's sort of evaluating what's important to you after you lose something. I know acting, obviously very important to you, but if something happened and you couldn't act anymore, like who would you be? Have you ever thought about like what life beyond your profession would sort of mold you? What kind of person it would mold you into being?
I have, and I always come up with nothing. I think because I've never really had to seriously contemplate that just yet. I think I'd maybe set up like a community theatre for young people who maybe can't afford a typical drama school route, maybe something like that.
Could you imagine starting out a lesson for students with, I was working with Spielberg one time and he told me, that would be the coolest way to start a class ever.
Yeah, and then be like, so listen, because I know. Shut up.
Shut up. I got to tell you, you were unbelievable in this. I love this film. And also, as I've told you 10,000 times, I'm obsessed with Ready Player One. I have a signed poster hanging in my apartment. And so you're a permanent fixture of my home here in Chicago.
No way.
So, yeah, for sure. So good to see you again. Hope you and your family are doing well. And hopefully next time we get to meet, we'll get to be in person again.
You too.
All right, take care. Bye, guys.
Bye.
Paul, what an honor, sir. Your performance in this was absolutely unbelievable. I'm going to ask a pretty self-serving question right off the top, which is obviously I'm talking to you from Chicago, a city that you have a lot of connection to. And I'm just sort of curious, you've had such an incredible career. To how much credit do you give this city for sort of shaping the career you ended up having?
Listen, Jake, that's Chicago. I'm born and raised Chicago. when I got back from Vietnam, I discovered acting, went to the University of Illinois, but Chicago has such a rich history of actors. Steppenwolf Theater was just getting started then, and we all revered the work they were doing. So the teachers that I ran into in Chicago really instilled in me. I didn't know what I was going to do when I got back from this Vietnam thing, but I discovered acting and saved my life. And I owe everything to all the teachers that I met and the workshops that I got to do in Chicago. So it was a big, big influence on me.
I love that you say that, because I'll go speak to schools and I talk to them about interviewing celebrities and stuff, and a lot of times the kids say, well, I really want to get into acting, but I don't live in LA or New York. And I always say, you don't have to. Like, you live in one of the greatest cities in the world for acting. And so I love that you're stressing that point.
I've been saying that for 20, 30 years since I moved out here, that Chicago, and when young kids ask me, what should I do? Go to Chicago. That's a great place to learn your craft. And then move to a bigger city or something, make that decision. But yeah, I agree.
Absolutely. And I love that you say that. It's mentioned, you mentioned Vietnam. And so I thought of Joe's backstory. And I love that he gets that moment where we learn about him a little bit. But he's the kind of character, you could make a series out of this guy. I would follow him for years, for seasons. He's so interesting. How much backstory did you create for him that maybe we never necessarily got to know? Because there's a lot more below the surface, I think, than we're getting.
No, you're right, boy. Wow, you're right about that. Listen, yeah, as a matter of fact, they're talking about a series. Maybe that might happen, but because it is.
Please.
However, but I shouldn't even say that. But you're right. But listen, when I read the script originally, it was an Iraq War veteran, okay, who had lost his hearing, and so when I auditioned, I let Darius know, the writer. I said, "Look, I'm a Vietnam veteran." And he changed it immediately. So how much of the backstory? Tons of it, because I was on an aircraft carrier. A lot of the guys on that aircraft carrier that worked on the flight deck are now my age, are deaf because of the paper thin Mickey Mouse ears that they used to use back in the 70s. So, and a lot of Joe's backstory has a lot to do. Every scene that I do, Vietnam, when I wake up in the morning, Vietnam is still in my head. I won't forget it ever. So the backstory is heavy with me, plus my my experiences with addiction, working with deaf ministries, all that. Joe is very, very close to me. Very.
Well, he's an incredible character, and I really do hope that we see more of him. As we wrap up, there was a moment in the film that kind of struck me for a second, and because obviously the film is subtitled, except when characters start using sign language in which there is no subtitle. And at first I thought, like, come on, I don't know what they're saying. And then there was a moment where I went, wow. For the first time, someone who the hearing audience is at a disadvantage for watching the film, and I felt ashamed for being angry that I couldn't understand. And so I'm just sort of curious. I'm assuming that was a conscious thought.
It is, because for as long as I've been alive, my parents were deaf, of course, and they would watch movies without captioning in those days. They were always left out of the conversation. I was sitting in front of the television interpreting The Fugitive with David Jansen for my dad way back in the day. Just to get them included on what's going on in the culture, the hearing culture, which they're not a part of. So that's a deliberate decision that I think Darius made, to give a hearing person the feeling of now the shoe's on the other foot.
Well, it was a brilliant decision. And Paul, if you can't tell, I'm a massive fan of yours and a massive fan of this film. Your performance was absolutely masterful, sir. It's truly an honor to be able to speak with you.
Thank you, Jake. Same for me. Thank you so much. Say hello to Chicago.
I will. Let me know when you come through. I'm here in Lake Point Tower, sir. I got a comfortable fold-out couch. You're welcome to it.
Hey, that's great. Okay, perfect.
Hey, Darius, what a freaking incredible film. Seriously, thank you so much for taking the time to do this, man. Your direction was masterful. I want to geek out for a second, talk about your usage of sound in this movie. Because whenever I was done, I was able to stream it to my TV, but when I was done, I put it on my laptop and then put headphones in just to kind of listen to some of the sound. And the way that you use sound to immerse us into what Ruben is experiencing. I was just wondering if you could talk about how you came up with the idea of that and the choice as a director to be able to pull that off, because it made me feel like I was in his shoes.
Well, thanks so much for the kind words. We have 4 minutes, right? So the sound, this was an odyssey. The sound mix alone was, I think, about 23 weeks on this movie, just the mix.
Wow.
It was a real incredible odyssey, to create this sound, but it actually started years before we made the film, and I had to find exactly the right sound designer. I found this French guy, Nicolas Becker. We started developing sound and like miking the inside of skulls and putting mics underwater and doing all this stuff. And then he actually came on set, and we would mic, like, as Riz would tell you after shots, you know, instead of doing just room tone, we'd get shots of Riz's eyelids, we'd have mics down his throat. You know, we were really looking to actually, I mean, there's a very, very deep dive on sound in this movie, and more so than you can imagine. And then even while we were cutting, and you said you wanted a geek, so I'm giving you geek.
Please.
Even while we were cutting the picture, we had to simultaneously, I'm not even counting the time in our post experience, was simultaneously doing sound work, because you can't cut the picture without the sound in this movie. And so, you know, I would actually take my incredible editor, Mikkel, would be in New York or in Denmark, and then I would go to Paris and I would be working with sound, and we would be simultaneously cutting scenes and doing sound. And then we went to Mexico and did it at Carlos Regades's place in Mexico for 23 weeks of just like a deep, deep sonic dive. So this thing is like as big as far as like tracks, it's as big as any action movie. It just is not, it's just for a different purpose.
Wow. Well, I know that a laptop isn't necessarily what you made this film to be watched on, but putting the headphones in was really cool for like just to kind of really take in the sound.
Glad
It was,
you did. I've actually wanted
so
to
cool.
tell Amazon to like put it as a, you know, right in front of the movie, just say, you know, unless you have a great system, listen on headphones.
Yeah, it was unbelievable. Speaking of sound, I want to talk about your decision to use subtitles throughout the film, except when characters are speaking using sign language, because I found myself getting frustrated that I didn't know what characters were saying.
Good.
And then sort of about halfway through went, well, shit, okay, like who am I? For once, I am at a disadvantage for being able to hear. And then and I was like, okay, that had to be a conscious choice on your part. That couldn't have been an accident. Like
you answered it for me.
I feel like this whole movie is a really interesting experience of understanding what the lead character's going through, both with the sound and with the subtitles.
Yeah, it's a beautiful comment. I really appreciate it, because it's a very committed first person perspective. You know, even in the script, the first line is "he hears." And it was always intended to be that. It wasn't we or we look at, it's he. So you're in Ruben's perspective from the first frame, even though you don't know it. And yes, if he doesn't understand sign language, you don't understand sign language. And for once, hearing people are in the minority. And that's exactly right. And as a matter of fact, when we were in the premiere in Toronto and we had a good chunk of deaf people in the audience, what was fascinating is that you felt it. Because all the deaf people were laughing at jokes, and the hearing people are like, what am I missing? You know, it was wonderful.
Love that. I've got 10,000 more questions for you, but they're giving me the wrap. If you can't tell, I'm a massive fan of this film, and I hope that you and I get to chat many more times, man, because I cannot wait to see where you go from here.
Thank you so much, man. I appreciate it. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Where we're going, we don't need roads.